Now, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, former 2024 presidential candidate. Governor, welcome.
Larry, great to be here.
As always, thank you.
Fantastic riff.
Thank you very much. Let me just start with the lawfare stuff. Go there. It's backfired. I mean, the trials are either being postponed or ended or in court. This thing in New York is a complete fiasco. This is a major miscalculation by Joe Biden. And I think on balance, as my pal Kim Strassel was writing in the Wall Street Journal, on balance, it's probably hurting Biden and helping Trump, which is exactly what Biden never expected.
Yeah, absolutely. And this total lawfare strategy is a travesty for America. But they had a four-legged stool. They had four cases. Three of them now, those legs have been cut off, and the fourth one is teetering. And it's an 8-year-old paperwork case. And America is going to see that this is not something that should have ever been brought in an election year. So it's going to be taken at face value, which is election interference. And voters are going to, I think, have already built that into their thinking. And that's why President Trump is going up in the polls and Joe Biden's going down.
I want to talk a little bit about energy. You're from North Dakota, of course, which is a huge energy state. There was one of these Washington Post breathtaking pieces. Imagine this. Donald Trump met with a whole bunch of oil producers and said to them, you need to raise money to elect me because I'm going to reopen the fossil fuel spigots and tear down all the Biden anti-fossil fuel regulations and all this climate change stuff. And we're going to have offshore drilling and we're going to go back to LNG. Of course he said that. Of course he had this meeting with the oil people. And of course he's asking them to raise money. I mean, he's completely transparent. The Washington Post, it's breathtaking. Oh, God, he did this. He did this. Isn't this terrible? Well, is it terrible?
Well, I was fortunate to be at that dinner.
That's all right.
With about
give us a blow-by-blow.
Yeah, but it was a fantastic discussion, and it was the President Trump that you're never going to see on mainstream media, which is over a 2-hour dinner. He went around the room and asked each of the executives the challenges that they were facing on permitting, on regulation, and what they're doing, one by one around the room, listening to everybody on what their challenges were. And of course, at the conclusion, you listen to all that. And the headwinds, the gale force headwinds that the Biden administration trying to crush U.S. energy has created, that, of course, in the interest of their own shareholders, they should all be trying to do what Democrat-led companies do. If it's in their own interest, they support candidates that support the policies that support their shareholders. So there's nothing breathless about it. I mean, this is just one of these administrations, the Biden administration, is trying to kill U.S. energy. The other one wants to support it. And why would you want to support it? You'd want to support it because Biden's energy policies are the things that are funding the wars that we're talking about. We're in 2 proxy wars that are being funded by Biden's energy policies because he lifted the sanctions on Russia and Iran. And then if you actually said, oh, well, the Biden's energy policy is about the environment, no. Because anything he does to reduce U.S. energy displaces, it doesn't reduce demand, it just shifts the supply to foreign sources. And the foreign sources, whether it's Venezuela, Russia, Iran, barely even have an EPA. And so they're not producing it as cleanly as us. So if you cared about the environment, you would want to have President Trump's plan. If you cared about our economy, you'd want to have President Trump's plan. If you cared about national security and our allies, you'd want to have President Trump's plan. So it's pretty easy to say that at that dinner that there was a consensus that, yeah, having President Trump would be good for the country.
We have another quote. I guess it was last week, Waukesha, Wisconsin. Take a listen to what President Trump said.
We're going to terminate his green news scam. It's going to be terminated, and we're going to end this war on American energy. We're going to drill, baby, drill.
I mean, he's totally transparent about this. Every place he goes for many years. And, of course, he will go to those CEOs and other supporters who want the program that you've just outlined with respect to across-the-board energy production. I mean, it's just the most transparent thing in the world. That's what candidates do. And I want another point that just came up. Big story in the Wall Street Journal. The former head of Pioneer, down in Texas, Sheffield is his name. The Federal Trade Commission has now launched an investigation with charges that he colluded with OPEC to keep prices high. There's no evidence of this, but that's the charge. Exxon's buying Pioneer. He's not going to be able to go on the board of Exxon anymore. Okay. I would say that Biden colluded with OPEC, that you're running prices now more or less in a range, let's say, of $80 to $100 a barrel, more or less, the last several years. In the Trump years, it was about $40 to $50. The difference is we're not producing more, we're producing less, we're relying on OPEC and Iran and Russia and Venezuela. That's the collusion. And I don't know why they can blame this poor guy. I'm sure it'll be thrown out in the courts. But to me, Biden has been the biggest sponsor of high oil prices, which are probably twice as high as they should be.
Well, they are, and there's a reason why. It's because the Biden administration likes high oil prices because it helps justify the switch to electric vehicles, or at least that's what they thought. It made them look more cost effective, and they thought if price is high, people will drive less internal combustion machines. But they didn't take into account two things. One is another arm of their government's trying to shut down all the electricity production in this country that's baseload. And so if I tell anybody that's out there thinking about buying an EV, you should understand that 2 years or 3 years from now, you might be paying 100% more for your electricity, and you may not be able to charge it whenever, because the Biden brownouts and blackouts are coming and high prices on electricity. And Biden, as a price manipulator, the most egregious thing he ever did was drain the Strategic Petroleum Reserve ahead of the midterms in half, and he turned the Strategic Petroleum
point.
He turned that into the political petroleum
That's
reserve.
a great point. That's right. That's direct price manipulation to buy votes and get gasoline prices down just before the midterms. You're exactly right. All right. Meanwhile, basically, Biden has put a knife in Israel's back at exactly the wrong time, sending exactly the wrong message. I know you have strong feelings about this.
Well, it's been a hallmark of America where, regardless of who's in power, we say we don't negotiate with terrorists. And Joe Biden literally is negotiating for the terrorist. I mean, when he's drawing a red line for Israel, saying we won't send you arms unless you stop doing X, we should have a president of the United States saying, Hamas, release the hostages, or we're going to just take you out. That's the negotiating leverage that the U.S. have. Every single one of our allies who saw him draw a red line for Israel has got to be going, is he going to draw a red line for us? You know, for Germany, for Japan, for South Korea. If North Koreans come in, then he's going to say to the South Koreans, well, we may not give you arms unless you do be nice to the North Koreans. The whole thing is bizarre. And as you said in your riff, I mean, this is all about the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. This is about votes in November. There's no other explanation for it.
Hamas, in all these negotiations, Hamas never once talked seriously about the release of the hostages. And unfortunately, no one knows how many of the hostages are still alive. The American hostages, for example, that Biden never talks about. Obviously, the Israeli hostages, and there are hostages from other countries that were caught up in that. They never talk about it. The deal was broken. They were firing rockets back, killing Israeli soldiers. So Israel did. I mean, General Keane was on last night or the night before, and basically he said Israel has no choice but to wipe out Hamas right now.
Yeah, and Biden lifting the oil sanctions on Iran, who's funding Hamas and the Houthis and Hezbollah, and then lifting sanctions on Qatar. I mean, everything he's doing is helping the enemy across this whole thing, and it's why we need President Trump back in. If President Trump was in office, first of all, I don't think Hamas would have ever attacked in the first place. And if he was in there now, he wouldn't be negotiating for the terrorists. He'd be supporting Israel, and this war would already be over.
You know, there was a rule which Ronald Reagan started, but there was a rule down through the years. The United States doesn't negotiate with terrorists.
Exactly.
But that's what we're doing.
Yeah, they're negotiating for the terrorists.
And we're walking away from one of our strongest allies, the strongest ally in the Mideast. What does that say to China? What does that say to China, you know, stroking their chin and thinking, you know what, the unreliable Americans, I think I'll pick off Taiwan.
Well,
what does that say to Russia? I think I'll go into Poland or Lithuania or some such thing.
Exactly.
It's pure weakness.
Yeah, and the weakness started with the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Right.
That's where it began, and it's just continued and continued. And we saw how World War II started because of Chamberlain's appeasement, and Biden he's passing Chamberlain in the appeasement category.
Yes, sir. Governor Burgum, we love having you on.
Likewise.
Good luck on the campaign.